Hey everybody, and welcome to my beginner's guide to Audiotool. This is just going to be an update from my old videos which showed you how to get started using Audiotool, but it's been a long time and I'm just going to show you some new stuff and take you through the process of building a very basic track. So let's get started here and click New Project. We'll close this. Now, first things first, just the basics. If you haven't used Audiotool before, we got the transport bar up here, and more importantly, if you want to set your BPM, it's up here. The default is 120. You just double click, type in whatever you want. We'll leave it at 120, and that's your BPM. So if we look on the right hand side here, we have a list of things. It says drums, synthesizers, tools, effects. This is where you're going to find all of the modules and plugins to create your synths and sounds and EQ and effect things and whatnot. So for our track, the very first thing we're going to do is make a basic drum beat from samples. And for that, we'll use the Machinist, which is a sampler. So we'll just drag this in onto our desktop, and you'll see here that it connects automatically to this little box here. Now, this little box is actually the master output, so anything you want having sound playing, you're going to want to connect it to this box. Okay, so if we look at the Machinist here, you'll see it says no sample, no sample. So we have to load some samples. To do that, we're going to go right beside devices and click samples. And a list of samples will come up. And all we have to do is just make sure this little arrow here is selected. This means we're looking for one shots and not loops, which basically just means more or less just drum sounds. So we're going to look up kick. We're just going to click here, drag it onto a Machinist channel, and click in the Machinist to add some notes. Let's hit play and hear it. Another thing you can do in the Machinist once you place the notes is click on a note and drag up and down to change the volume. You'll see the intensity of the light changes to reflect the volume change. So let's just finish making our drum kit here. Drum kits usually have a few things. They usually have a kick, a snare, and hats, so we'll just add those. Don't really like these. Whatever, we'll just add this. Snare big. We'll add a couple snares here. Let's also add some hats. So we'll type in hats. Use this one. And we'll just add some random hats. If you're wondering, I'm just pressing the spacebar to start and stop, which is a handy shortcut in most audio applications actually. We'll just change the volumes, a couple notes here, and hear how that sounds. So that's our basic drum pattern. Now what we're going to want to do is create a fill. Fill is basically just a small variation on the drum pattern that's slightly different. So how do we do that? Well, we need to create another pattern. And to do that, we're just going to look up top here, and we see it says bank A, B, C, D, and pattern 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we can make more than one pattern in the Machinist. So to make our fill, we're going to want to copy this pattern to pattern 2, because if we look here, pattern 2 has nothing in it. So we're going to right click on the Machinist and we're going to go to copy pattern. We're going to go to pattern 2, and then we'll simply go paste pattern. And now we have the same pattern. We'll add a couple extra notes in the snares, change where the kicks are a bit, maybe change this hat. And there's our fill. So now we're going to want to take pattern 1 and pattern 2 and chain them together. So it goes pattern 1, pattern 2. To do that, we're going to need to use the timeline, which is down here. Now the timeline is where you put all your patterns and instruments and sequence them in order so that you can make a song. Now to get these notes out of the machinist, we can do two things. First thing we're going to do is right click on the machinist and go to create pattern track. That will open a new lane in the timeline, and you can simply double click. Oops, I was in the wrong spot. Move this marker here. You can simply just double click and you'll see a box that says A1 comes up. That'll play through pattern A1 whenever you hit play. And you see it stops there. So let's make another one. Double click, creates the box, and we'll right click and go to switch pattern A2. Now it'll play A1 and A2. You see it switches. And since we're in 4/4 time, I'm just going to copy these over and make it a full 4 bars. So let's have a listen to how that sounds. So that's how to use the pattern track to make your drums. I'll show you another way now. Let's delete these. We'll reset the machinist patterns by going to preset and clear. Next, I'm going to right click. I'm going to right click and go to create note track. And you'll see a note lane comes up here. So we double click to make the box, and double click the box again and a piano roll will come up. So here you can just sequence the notes in a piano roll instead of in the machinist interface. So we'll just make some basic pattern here again. You'll see these little lines down here. These are just the note volumes, much like we had in the machinist. So just change some note volumes a little bit. And now what we're going to do is we're going to hold the control button, click and drag this to clone it. You can do this pretty much with everything in the timeline and Audiotool. If you're editing notes, if you're editing patterns, if you're editing audio, you just hold control and it will clone. So let's double click this one and add our variation. Okay, so we'll move this over here and make a full 4 bars again. Let's just delete this pattern track because we're not going to be using it. Let me show you a couple more things in the timeline. First, very easy. You can just select whatever you want to recolor and select a color for it. So we just select it, right click, go to color, change it to whatever. Next thing is we can just click on the device and it will zoom to wherever your device is. And more importantly, we can rename it. So we'll just call it drum. All right, so the next thing we're going to want is a hat loop. So to put loops and audio into our project, we're going to use something called an audio track, which lets us deal with wave files in the Audiotool server. So we'll click that on, and what do we have here? It says auto connect, no more inputs available. Please add another mixer to your arrangement. So basically what that means is we need to have all of our audio routed to this main little box here, which is our audio output. So we'll disconnect this cord and we're going to add a mixer. In Audiotool, the main mixing console is called the Centroid. So let's go to the Centroid over here on our devices side. Click, drag, and drop it into our workspace. And don't be intimidated by this. All you really got to look at is just these different channels here. It says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, blah, blah, blah. All you do is just look for the master output on your device. Most of the time it's just on the right hand side or up top here. See, it says drum master. Just connect it to 1. And then our audio track output, we're going to connect to 2. And we see here that the mixer is connected to the main audio output. So now we should be able to hear our drums again. By the way, make sure, again, something's always connected to your main audio output. If it's not connected, you're not going to hear sound. So let's disconnect that. Now, let's go back to our samples and look for our hat loop. So hats is already typed in. We're going to go to this circle with an arrow, which means it's a music loop and not just a one-time sample. So let's click on that. We'll put that in our project. We'll see the audio track made a lane for itself. So all we need to do is just drag that audio into the audio track. That's a little loud and I don't like the way it sounds, so I'm just going to bring the volume down a little bit on those hats. Okay. So you'll see here that this hat pattern is sticking out way past our loop here that we made. We don't really need it, so we're going to use the razor tool, which is right here besides the little hand. So just click the razor tool and let's zoom in here and just click to separate the audio, and we'll select the part we don't want and delete it. Another interesting thing you can do with your audio is reverse it. So let's just let's create a slice here with the razor tool at the end, and we're just gonna reverse the very end here. So right click on the part you want to reverse and go to reverse playback. Okay, let's just take a second here, just rename this hat. We'll color it yellow because, well, real hats are yellow, I guess. Okay, so now we pretty much got all the drums we need, and the next thing we're going to want is to add an instrument. Let's go back to our devices, and we're going to load a synth called the pulverisateur. Drag that in, it'll automatically connect to the Centroid. And if we want to play at the synthesizer here, we could just right click and go to this neat little show software keyboard. That lets us play sounds on our synth. Now, if you already know what you're doing and you know how to make sounds on synthesizers and whatnot, and you're just new to Audiotool, you could probably figure out how to do the pulv and make your own sounds and whatnot. But if you don't, it's very easy to load presets. You just right click, go to preset, load, and there'll be a big list of community made presets for you to browse. If you want a consistent list of presets, I've made presets for both the pulverisateur and the Heisenberg, and you can find them just by typing in inf underscore. So we're going to use this one, inf vibropluck. Click on it, we'll go yes, and it will load the sample. Let's turn that down just a little bit. Okay, so much like I showed you with the machinist, synths will work with the piano roll. So we'll double click the box again, and our piano roll comes up. We're gonna need to make this longer, so click and drag the edge to make the pattern longer, and we'll also click this loop header here to make it the full 4 bars. And we're gonna make some notes in the key of G, so. Alright. Let's make G, G, make D, F. Okay, so that's our basic pattern. We will color this orange and call it Plink. So that sounds a little boring. Let's add an effect. Let's go back to our devices and we're going to put a delay on. So simply click, pull the delay out, and we're going to connect the output of our synth into the input of the delay. Easy, right? Okay, so let's quickly just add a couple more instruments to fill out our song here. Next thing we're going to add is some pads. So we're going to use a synth called Space, which is the newest synthesizer in Audiotool next. And we're just going to pull this out here. Again, it'll automatically connect. Let's have a listen. Again, we're going to go to preset load. I'm gonna grab this pad space choir. Yes. And we're just gonna make a pad pattern here. I'm switching to bar to make my notes longer. And just make a couple chords here. It sounds a little loud to me, so I'm just going to pull the volume of that down in the mixer. If you look along the bottom here, we have all these faders. This is just your volume to sort of control the levels of your different synths. Okay. Last thing we're going to need is a bass line. So let's use the Heisenberg. Pull this in and give this a test. We're going to load another preset, INF BA, which is how I tag my basses. I'm going to go to square. Then I'm just going to make a quick, easy pattern here. Let's do G note. Switch back to 16th notes. Want that to be F. Okay, so that's pretty much the basic idea of the track. So now we're going to sequence these patterns and make it into a full song. Simple song, but a full song. So what can we do here? Let's just move this over. Oops, we'll change quantize to bar so it doesn't get knocked out of position. And then we'll start with just the hats and the chords. And we'll add in maybe the little pluck sounds. And then we'll play everything 2 times. Maybe we'll just drop the drums at the end here. And then we'll play just chords and drums. Bring the hats back in. I'll do this one more time, sure. What we're gonna do, we're just gonna fade it out there. So, a common question I get asked by people starting out is how I can do fade-ins and fade-outs. For that, I'm gonna show you how to do something called an automation. So all you have to do to make an automation, you right-click on any control in Audiotool, and you go to Automate Parameter. In this case, we're going to automate the main volume of the mixer. So this, as you can see, just controls the volume of all the instruments. Instead of manually doing this, we can just create an automation to do it for us. So right click, automate parameter. We're going to double click. But by the way, if you don't want to double click with the arrow tool, you can also use the pencil tool. So we'll just use the pencil tool to create the block this time. Double click, and we'll just create a ramp going up, which will move the volume up for us and fade all our instruments in. So let's have a listen. You can see here that the fader is just moving up on its own. So what's something else we could do with an automation? Well, let's automate the filter cutoff on the Heisenberg bass. So we can do that a different way. We can actually live record the movements we're making in Audiotool. To do that, all you got to do is hit the record button and move something around, and it will just record right into the timeline. So let's do that right now. You see our recording comes up here. You'll notice the audio stuttering a little. Sorry about that. I really can't do much about that. It's just computer doesn't like running all this stuff at the same time. So you see it's just moving on its own now. At the end of our track, let's just put a fade out. So it's going to be the same thing. Just we already have our automation lane, so we're going to copy it over. And we'll simply just make it go down instead of up. Okay, so we'll say that's our track, and that's what we want to publish. So we're going to just pull the end of this seeker header here all the way out, and you'll see this little thing pop up at the right hand side of the timeline. This is just the track end marker. So we'll just move it here. So that'll be the end of our track. Okay, so all we have to do now is just go to Project, Edit Properties, put in name, cool song. You could put in a picture, tags, genre, whatever. I guess this is down tempo. And then you just hit update, and that'll save your draft. When you're ready to publish your track, all you got to do is go to Project and Publish. I don't want to publish, but yeah, this is how you publish your track to the Audiotool site. Anyways, that goes through pretty much how to create a basic track in Audiotool your first time. I hope you find this helpful. I hope you have fun with the new Next. I know I'm loving it. So hope you have fun too, because that's what it's all about. And I will see you later.